Calm down. Fist to the face. No, code, thank you. Good words. Which sounds very toddler. I don't want to. I'm done talking to people today. My name's Erin Schnabel, and I work at Red Hat now. It'll be almost 3 whole years, which is weird for me to say because I worked at IBM for 21 years before that. So feeling like I have a second career is like still new, even though it's been 3 years. Still feels young. As kids still get to play the new kid card sometimes. Although I think the shine is wearing off on that one. I don't think I could play that card for very much longer.
Yeah, so you've been 21 years at IBM, and then you decided to move to Red Hat in the middle of a pandemic, which was probably not, intentional. You didn't think it was a pandemic, oh, I'll move. So what was the thought process?
No, it was just time. Of course, IBM acquired Red Hat around that time. And so there were a couple times when kind of a bunch of us slid over because both companies were trying to focus on, okay, so now that this acquisition is happening, do we have a bunch of people doing redundant things? How should we optimize? It's kind of normal stuff. Red Hat is still very much an independent entity. Mm-hmm. But there have been a couple cases where things have gone actually both back and forth, right? So there's been a bit of an exchange on both sides to clarify who's doing what in some cases or to reduce overlap.
How did that shift actually make a difference to you? And what were the kind of positives and negatives that came out of
that? At this point in my career, I am a chaos agent. As I went to higher level roles between the two companies, like especially at IBM, some of the way they shape their higher level roles are very kind of regimented, and it's not regimented, but they're focused, right? You like the distinguished engineer position at IBM, that's an executive position. You're basically like the equivalent of a director, right? In some cases. And so contribution to a specific product, a direct tie to revenue, a bit of a swim lane, all of that is kind of required to reach distinguished engineer. And fundamentally, that's not something I'm interested in. I did own stuff. I did deliver stuff. I did all that a while ago. And I don't want to. Which sounds very toddler. I don't want to, but I don't want to. I did it. I'm more interested in trying to help help tell better stories across products or between groups, to get people to really leverage, take better advantage of what people are doing, as the big whole. It got to be interesting because it's like, Erin, you don't own this, so you can't make these decisions, which is fine. It's true. I didn't own it. It wasn't my decision to make. But it meant that if I was looking at a thing and then there was another senior technical staff person working on a thing and I was trying to help bridge between two, then I was in competition for their job, which isn't at all what I was trying to do, right? I'm trying to tell a joint story between some things. Like, you guys could really do better if you told this story here, right? Can you guys work together? But then it looked like I was trying to take their job, which I was always very transparent that I wasn't. But that whole swim lane, in order to be promoted to this DE level, you have to basically show individual achievement, my hoarded pile of stuff, which is not really where I am at this stage of my career.
Which doesn't necessarily mean you have to drown everybody else, but some people have that opinion.
Yeah, well, but I mean, the distinguished engineer package was really like the way it's shaped. And I realized, like, I use the word package all the time because that's what IBM called it. Like, when you put together all of the materials for your promotion case, right? We called that a package. And I realized afterwards, what did you mean? It's like, oh, that's not a term everybody uses. Oops. But, at Red Hat, my chaos monkey influence and the fact that I like to work across groups and, be a force multiplier, good words, a force multiplier, right? All that stuff is appreciated for what it is. So I don't have to try to fit myself into a box that I'm not, if that makes sense.
Hmm.
Um, which is huge for me because I feel like I can just be me. And
Which is an advantage.
it's not just an advantage, it's amazing. Like it is absolutely amazing. People say, I find this whole conversation about like bringing your authentic self to your job to be a very interesting and nuanced conversation because it can happen at so many
Hmm.
levels and it can mean more than we think it means. For me to be me, right, having a manager that I do not have to slow down ever. I could talk about all however many parallel tracks there are going in my head. I'm not saying I'm a multitasker. I am not, but I am huge on tangents and he follows them and it's amazing. And like that's a big deal. Feeling like I don't like I had to work with people in my past who literally it was buffer overflow as soon as I started talking. And so I on one hand it's good to have to learn to slow down and be deliberate and try to focus on one topic at a time. It's also, for me, at times, very hurtful. It's like, I cannot explain all these things to you fast enough because I have to rearrange everything about how I communicate because why? Because you don't like it? Like why do you get to not like it and I have to do it your way? It's just it's the dumbest thing. Um Being an effective communicator means, yeah, you have to do it and get over it and be able to do it. But it hurt me sometimes. I felt shut down because I had to slow down or because I would just hit the overflow switch for them and then that was the end of the conversation. So, I have never been a manager. I've always been a developer or like a development lead, delivery lead kind of person. Um I've always been well, and it was for a couple of reasons. Like I was always very adamant that I did not want to go into management. Really upfront, in the face adamant, partly because of the overall push that women might eventually actually want to be managers because they don't want to write code. So I was always very fist to the face. No, code, thank you. um I don't know, maybe a little more outspoken about that than I needed to be, but I wanted it to be real obvious to everyone.
Well, I suppose if you think about history, I mean, women were the ones that were writing code.
Yeah, well, yeah, and there were a lot of women around, but a lot of them were in management. Which having lots of women in management in a technical career path as a woman was awesome, right? Which I mentioned, like having that support network in the management chain is huge. Um, but I wanted the few other women that I knew, right, to see me remaining technical so that they would have permission to remain technical if they wanted to. If they didn't, that's fine. But I did. So it's not like I was
Hmm.
sacrificing anything. I wanted to remain technical. I was just maybe louder about it than strictly necessary to make sure they knew they had permission.
I still consider myself to be technical, but I have um, pushed it into my own time. So I get to decide what I do when I do it.
Yeah, at this stage I don't I try not to write code that's required as a mainline for release. Right, I don't want to be the bottleneck in actually delivering something, but I deliver plenty of code that actually matters and gets used, and I'm just not usually in the blocking path because I know if time constraints happen, I need to be able to not focus elsewhere if that's where I'm needed, and then come back to it. But there's all kinds of things that are good background tasks that you can still do to clean things up or move things forward. So I try to do those.
If you could give your 20-year-old self one piece of advice, what would it be?
Calm down. I mean, I'm an enthusiastic person. I think I was born that way. Um, but yeah, I it's hard to answer those kinds of questions. I sat down with a couple friends when we were at DevNexus, which was right after QCon. And um, the parallel question to that, or the same question to that, is like, what advice would you give a new career person right
Mm.
now? And it's both of those questions are really hard, but for different reasons, right? I am where I am because of who I was when I was 20. So if I would have done something different, would I be where I am now? I don't know, right? I made mistakes. I
Well,
fell in traps.
it was an open question. It's just what piece of advice.
Yeah, calm down
Yes.
is probably the right one. Still, like, figure out how to be level. I learned that lesson eventually, somewhat. Um, I am still very excitable, but I do channel it a little better than I used to. But like, for new career folks, can I give them advice for what to do with their career? I don't think I can, because we're at a tipping point where careers going forward are not going to be the same as when I started. They're already not the same as when I started, or was when I started, but like really, really for real,
Hmm.
it's going to be augmented development, right? Like, you're not going to be writing code from scratch the way I did when we started, and you had to go from nothing or a bunch of assembler. Like, um,
Yeah.
yeah. Like, I started my career on the mainframe, so we were doing PL1 and C++ and some Java, because Java was still newish at the time, especially on Z. So, which was OS 390 then, OS 360, OS 390. Here's the kids coming out of college now, they're not going to do that. And I worry at like the backlash against using ChatGPT and other AI things right now for kids and students. It's like, man, no, they should be using it all the time. And they should be learning when it's wrong and what to do about when it's wrong and how to tell when it's wrong and how to actually work with the prompts and understand when it's gone off into the hinterlands, to do something wrong. Like, their entire futures are going to be shaped by working with AI.
Yeah, and I think that's the right attitude and level. That I get so many people who are just convinced that AI is just going to write code for them, but there's the point where it stops innovating. If the only code it's able to look at is code that it wrote, then it's
It gets worse. It just gets worse and worse. And then you take all of the people who created some of the programming languages that we started with. How old are all of them now? Like, we haven't invented anything new in software since the 60s. We know this,
yeah.
right? It's
There's
all cyclic.
no new paradigm. I keep getting people who are convinced that doing functional programs is a new thing, but apparently it's like
So
what
not.
1957.
I know, it's like, you guys go back and understand our history, would you please? Because we haven't done anything new in software in
Yeah.
decades.
I
But
mean, the big thing that's changed is IDEs, UIs, the ability to do things fast, the ability to test things. Because the cycle times just between you writing code and finding out whether it worked or not has gone to milliseconds versus days.
yeah, and computational power has certainly changed. So some of our approaches to how we build things is different, not just the cycle time wise, but because, I mean, you didn't used to have a laptop.
Yeah, you didn't have to worry about having really short variable names because you were worried about the space you were storing the program in.
Yeah, yeah.
And
What was your first computer?
literally there.
What is it?
It's a 1984 BBC Micro, which is a 6502 based. That's well done.
Yeah, mine was a luggable. It was one of those things that had a handle but was 45 pounds. It was a knockoff. It was not an IBM brand. But the first one I know, it just had, I've lost it to the Twitter archives. It had like two 5 1/4 floppy drives, no RAM to speak of, little flip up monitor. It's 45 pounds, 50 pounds. It had a handle. And the thing that would flip up had like 4 lines of text on a little
Yep.
monochrome monitor. So we took the thing off and put like a real monitor on it. It was a long time ago. But
Yeah.
like, playing computer games where you had to remember to put the disc in, or being excited because you had two drives so you could leave the game disc in and then do the save get disc and the other. Like, the kids don't understand any of that now. They're like, oh, it glitched.
Oh, the joys of loading a game off tape. So you made your decision wisely, because you're going to spend 20 minutes minimum just loading the game, let alone. So there's a level of commitment to playing that game. Not like now; it's a straight in console cartridge, whatever. Straight in, load it, play it for 2 seconds. Bored of that, try something else.
There are definite things that we do differently now for good reasons, but the concepts are very cyclic. I used to think of it like my family's really big. I have a big family. And so I feel like it's basically family generation kind of stuff, right? It's like you got the kids who get to be teenagers, right? You come in as like a baby. As soon as you've been at work long enough to be a teenager, you think everything your parents did is stupid. So you're going to do it a different way, right? So you guys start doing it a different way, and you have the new generation of kids coming in. About 15 years. Oh, well, what you did is stupid. We're going to do it a different way. And the problem is that the way those generations stack up. Ooh, all of we should have distributed pieces. Oh no, that's too hard. We should do all of the pieces together. Oh no, that's too hard. It's about 15 years cycle.
If you had to highlight one thing in your entire career, what is it you're most proud of?
Liberty. WebSphere Liberty, which is now an open source project. But that was amazing. So that started, Erin, please go figure out what we need to do, because we're going to have to create a runtime that is more responsive and flexible, and all of the things that we needed at the time. This was like, it's earlier than I think. So it's maybe 2007, 2005, 6, 7 in there somewhere. I think 2007. It had to be. So me by myself was probably 2006. And then 2007, we got executive support to be like, to create the proof of concept, right? That's 7 people's worth of salary, right? To go make a thing out of this idea. That took a couple years. And then there was a new IBM product kind of launching, but then it was like WebSphere also needed it. So like our little POC forked, so to speak. It's like the nascent thing that we built did go off to live in appliances. And another woman and I took, we then took what we had, and we mixed in with some other people, and it grew into what Liberty is now. So that was like me, then 7, then 7 of us, I guess, that were trying to say a different 7, right? Here's where we kind of started. Here's what we need for this other app server space. So let's adapt what we need. And then that led to a team of, it was 5 squads of 10, right? So we went from 7 to 50. And then that went for a little bit. And then we had a whole bunch of people from the rest of WebSphere. So it was 50 to 100 to maybe 250, 300. And then I left because it was time. It was time to go. It was time to let someone else lead. So that was hard. I mean, it wasn't. It was, you don't necessarily want to let something go that you built from scratch, but it was the right thing to do. I was ingrained enough in the organization that had I stayed, that next leader would not have had a fair shake, right? Like, that's what I see happen in IBM still to this day. And it bothers me a little bit, because people's careers, they peak, they plateau. And it's not because they can't keep growing. It's because the people above them don't go anywhere. Which is bad for them too, honestly. Like, they stagnate too. They don't get to do anything new. They're just keeping on doing what they were doing. But that means all of the people under them, like, it just gets crowded, and, and it's not necessarily like, I don't feel that everyone has to move all the time. Just having some long-standing organizational knowledge can be good. If you're a person who likes just writing code, thank you very much. I don't want to be a huge leader, and I just want to be happy doing my thing. Like, if that's your bag, that's your bag. That's great. I'm not gonna knock that one, although it puts you at risk as technology changes. If you're too much in one area, you become vulnerable over time because things change. Um, but I specifically mean senior leaders who don't leave. It's bad for them, honestly. It's like if they're a leader, they should be moving and trying new things periodically because it's good for their brains. It's good for them. There's a very strong, you have to be present and in person to be successful. And frankly, I hate that whole notion. It makes me very angry. I try to rein it in. But no, a lot of what I worked on, all of Liberty, all of that stuff, none of it was in Poughkeepsie where I was. So IBM's a global company. If there would have been a rule in place, Erin, you can only work on projects that are in Poughkeepsie, I would not have been able to do that. I would not. And it was so huge. I grew so much. Um, I mean, that was just a huge experience, and it would have been off the table because of where I lived. And so like when I look back at how many opportunities I had because I was not constrained to a location, when I start seeing all this stuff about, well, you have to be in person to be successful, it's like, no, you don't. You have to know how to accommodate. Like, I don't know, for people who feel really strongly that the only way they get to know people is at the water cooler, it's like, well, how often do you make an effort to have a one-on-one conversation with someone instead of, just the meetings with 15 people? If you have a group of people, you do want to be efficient about it because you don't want to waste people's time. But having those one-on-one conversations are really important, but you have to make time to do it. And I've always found that side conversations, one-on-one Slack conversations, I mean, like, yes, there's places where the communication should stay with the team, right? So that everybody has a good idea of what's happening. But relationships are formed one-on-one. So you just have to make the effort to connect with people as individuals. Well, I'm such an introvert. It's really funny, but like, I prefer working from home because when I've reached my human limit, I can just stop. I'm done talking to people today. I'm going to go to, put my head in code and be alone for a while. And I've always found that to be what my brain needs. It needs a break.
I do find the separation of concerns sometimes a bit difficult. Spare time stuff is very much same place, same chair, same day. So
yeah, there is that. That can be a challenge to have. And to some extent, I've just said, "Well, I'm one human. Get over it." There's not two of me. There's not like the one me and the other me. It's all me. So things get entangled in my head, and that's okay. I try to give myself a pass on that. I'm one person.
If you've enjoyed this episode of Pumpkin Bite, then please click like. And if you'd like to hear more of my conversation with Erin, then tune in next time. In the meantime, be safe, take care, and remember, you are the future.